Hello, my name is Dr. Tom Bennett. I'm from Kane University in the Battleship New Jersey Oral History Project. Today is February 3rd, the year 2006. We're aboard the Battleship New Jersey in the television studio, and of course we're harbored here in Camden, New Jersey. Today I'm speaking with Mr. David F. Cross Sr. of New Hope, Pennsylvania, who worked as a mechanical designer for a New York ship in Camden, New Jersey from the years 1958 to 1965. Mr. Cross, thank you for talking with us today.
You're welcome.
Let us start off the conversation. And I'd like to first ask, how did you become involved with New York Ship?
The chief engineer, mechanical engineer at New York Ship, knew my family, and they had asked me to come for an interview and make an application, which I did, and I was hired. My background was drawing, and I did 2 years at the State College to become an art teacher. And from that point on, I went to New York Shipbuilding Corporation.
What state college did you attend?
Kutztown State College in Pennsylvania.
What made you decide to go from Kutztown to the shipyard?
I decided that I didn't want to teach, and I had a drafting background and an art background, so I decided to go into the drafting field.
Now, once you arrived at New York Shipyard, what did you do? What happens?
I learned about ships, and I did a lot of drawings, both conventional power submarines, the aircraft carrier Kitty Hawk, I worked on that. The nuclear ship Savannah, I worked on that. Worked on several destroyers, destroyer escorts. Went out on trial trips on the Kitty Hawk, both trial trips, and on several destroyers and destroyer escorts.
So your job then was largely as a designer of ships?
All the mechanical systems, for instance, on the submarines, we did something that's done now by CAD. We did a comprehensive drawings of the ship, of plans and sections of all the systems in the ship, so that we could establish a better way that they wouldn't interfere with one another. You would see all the systems on one drawing in color, and it worked out very well. We didn't have a lot of interferences then. Now they do composites on CAD to do the same thing, and also to present what the project looks like.
So was this drawing done as the ship was being constructed or after it was finished?
As the ship was being constructed, so that we could 4,500-pound hydraulic and pneumatic systems and all of those types of systems on the ship were routed so that they would clear one another, be located in the right place, have the right valving and so forth, so that everyone in charge of the ship and its construction could see and move things as they wanted to. We showed all the duct work and everything that was on the electric cable.
So basically then, your drawings, they were hand drawings?
Yes, they were at that
So
time.
your hand drawings then became basically the Bible for the ship, as it were, every little bit and piece of equipment on the ship is located.
That's right.
And did they have to be accurate to scale, or were they more interpretive?
They were accurate to scale. They were drawn on 27-foot-long drawing boards, large-scale drawings. And they were accurate to scale. They had to be so that we could be sure everything cleared each other.
How many men and women would be involved in this work at a time?
Well, the drawing room had 600 people in it, and they were all disciplines. They were the structural, the electrical, the mechanical, instrumentation, all the different disciplines were involved in that one large room. So if we wanted to find something out, we would simply walk to the area and say, hey, where's this ductwork drawing, and so forth. So we could coordinate very easily that way.
Were most of the people in this line of work skilled in art to start with? Did the shipyard train them in art, or what was their background?
No, they were skilled in drafting. We did not necessarily do these drawings as an art drawing, but as a to-scale graphic drawing. Plans, sections through every 4 feet on the ship, so that we would know exactly what the diameter was, what the structure was at every frame. And that helped clarify where we would run things.
How long, pick out a ship and tell us how long it would take, in effect, to create an entire set of drawings for the ship?
Um, it would depend upon how quickly the ship was developed as far as the ductwork drawings, the electrical drawings, the piping drawings, the mechanical equipment. Normally it would be a couple of years,
2 years, 3 years?
that frame, that kind of frame.
That time frame. So as the ship's being built, there would be persons like yourself going aboard the ship, drawing as it's being put together.
We would take the information from the mechanical drawings that were made for the ship. I did, however, spend a lot of time going out to the ship to verify different interferences or whatever. But we took the information from ductwork drawings, electrical drawings, mechanical drawings, piping drawings, and all of them would be coordinated and modified depending upon what the composite drawing would show. Oh, this is an interference, you must move this, that kind of thing.
And so would things actually be moved sometimes based on your drawings?
Yes.
Give me some examples of things that you recalled being moved.
For instance, if there were valves that had to be operated and they weren't located in convenient locations where someone could reach them, we would see it on the drawing, see where the catwalks were, and move those valves so that they could be conveniently operated and repaired.
This would be then a one-time repair? Say if you had 4 ships of a class, like the Iowa ships, the battleship New Jersey, you had 4 ships of a class. Would you identify these problems on the first ship and then improve that on the other ships, or was it just a one-time only adjustment?
Each ship would have its own drawings, and if they were to be exactly repeated, then we would simply change the title on the drawing to the ship that was applicable. But most of the time, the ships were never exactly the same because over the time period, things develop and change. Equipment becomes different, so therefore we would do whatever was required for each ship.
So therefore, is this logical to say that when you created a set of drawings for a ship over 2 or 3 years, that set of drawings could not be replicated specifically for another ship of the same class?
It could be if they used the same equipment and had the same design and it was exactly the same size hull, that kind of thing. But normally it would require modifications because as valving improved, they therefore would substitute new valve types, delete valves, add multi-port valves, things of that nature.
So basically, as I recall my time in the service, we always used to get these notices coming out, which you see posted all over the ship. This notice modifies previous notice, was modified previous notice about such and such piece of equipment. Is that what would happen? I guess these things would be sent out as ships are at sea for a 10 or 20 year lifespan or so.
I don't know how they would maintain if they replaced a valve or something or a piece of equipment. I don't know how they would maintain those drawings. Maybe it could be at a Navy yard where they would update those drawings and keep them up to speed as to exactly what was happening as the ship was in service for a period of time.
So when you would come aboard New York Ship or any other person came to work for them in the department you worked in, was there any training involved, or did people come with just a skill base already set?
No, there was training involved. There had to be. Not everyone had the experience that was necessary. We would work under the guidance of engineers and senior draftsmen to learn how we should present things, where we should make drawings, how we should cut sections, and develop that way.
How long would that training last?
It could last, depending upon the person and depending upon what they were doing, for a year or two. So that they would develop things and know how to design things based on the system they were working with.
Now, is this skill that you have, is this considered a fairly skilled profession and well paid?
Yes.
For the shipyard in general?
Yes. Yes, it was.
So each shipyard then, to help me understand this, had to have its own set of craftsmen or artists like yourself to interpret the ships and draw the ships as they're being produced. Is that correct?
That's correct. Otherwise, they couldn't produce the ships. All the designs for the hull of the ship would be done by experienced naval architects, and they would check the balance of the ship to make sure that it wouldn't sink, and what would have to happen if they had to close certain locks in the ship so that it wouldn't take on too much water. they all had to be trained, and many of them had college education.
When did computer-aided design, CAD, start entering the marketplace? Was that after you left the shipbuilding industry?
That, yes, yes, it was. It was considerably quite a few years after. But I think we had an early start on it because they realized it was an important endeavor to be able to get all the systems on one drawing and color them so that they were identifiable and that they cleared one another. It saved a lot of money in the field because you'd have to tear it out, change it. This way you could do it before you actually constructed it.
How many sets of drawings? Say you come up with one large set of drawings for the ship. How thick would that be? Would it be multiple containers?
There would be many, many drawings. There would be a section cut at every frame, which is roughly every 4 feet through the ship dimension. Therefore, we had sections, and we had several plans where if it got too congested, we would take, okay, for the bottom 5 feet, we do this. We make another plan for 5 feet above that. So they would have to interconnect with one another. As a pipe would go down into the lower area, it would be picked up by the drawing below.
Would the same thing be done for all the gun compartments? Drawings interior of each turret and so on like that?
No, no, I didn't see that being done. It was mainly because they're kind of prefab things, and they are pre-assembled and done by whoever you purchase them from.
Now, what type of ships did they build at New York Shipyard in Camden?
They built destroyers, destroyer escorts, submarines. The ones that I worked on were conventional power. The nuclear ship Savannah was built there, and that was a passenger and a freight ship, which is not in service now, but it was for quite a few years. Apparently it economically wasn't very feasible, so they had to put it in mothballs. I have a painting of that I made when I worked at New York Ship. This is a photograph of the nuclear ship Savannah, which was a large oil color painting that I made, and this is a photograph of that painting. And this was bought by New York Ship, I believe, and given to the Navy. I don't know where it is now, but...
And what did New York Ship pay you for the painting?
$350.
$350. And what year did you create that? Did you draw it?
It was in the early 1960s.
Early 1960s. And so that became property of New York Ship, and then the Navy took it over?
From what I understand, yes.
So somewhere it's in the Naval Archives.
Yes, it is, somewhere.
Could probably research that on the internet if you wanted to.
Okay.
Identify it.
Okay.
Now you have another pen and ink sketch you brought with you too, if you could hold that up.
Yes, this is, I believe, a destroyer that had a history. Apparently the same name of the destroyer was used from very early ships all the way through the 1900s until the one that was assembled by the New York Shipbuilding Corporation.
And the number on that destroyer is?
19.
19. So for historical purposes, destroyer number 19. When was that destroyer built? Do you recall?
This again was in the early 1960s, as far as I remember, yes.
So there's a heritage of 4 ships behind that destroyer, which might still be on duty, might have been sold to some other Navy in the world at this point.
That may be true.
Now, how did you come to become an artist, looks like for New York Ship, doing some of the interpretation?
They had found out that I had some art experience, and I had requested that I take some drawings for the nuclear ship Savannah and paint them. And they really didn't know what my level of expertise was until after I started painting them, and they seemed to like it.
And how many paintings and drawings did you do of ships for New York Shipyard?
I believe it was just these 2. That's all I remember making.
Did many other people get involved in drawing ships like that for the shipyard? Or?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Is there anything else you want to say at this point about your specific function at the shipyard, what you did that's important that I may not have asked about?
I started by learning to design a lot of the systems, the steam systems and the equipment, and installing it and making it on drawings. I also got involved in some pneumatic and hydraulic systems, 4,500-pound high-pressure systems when I worked on the submarines. And then from there, once they saw that I could do these drawings, they asked me to do composite drawings in color, which I did.
What was harder to work on, submarines or larger ships?
They're all not easy, but the submarines were harder because of the restricted limitations of space inside the submarine. And you want to maintain access as much as possible.
Did you go to sea at any point on these ships to finish up your drawings?
I went on boat trial trips with the Kitty Hawk. I didn't do any drawings on there. I actually walked around and did surveys. Every half hour we had to go and do readings on the equipment down in the engine room and so forth. So I volunteered to do that. And that was true also of some destroyers, destroyer escorts. We had some interesting occurrences. We hit a whale on one of the trial trips, and we had to come back, and I'm not sure, but I think it was the Kitty Hawk. We had to put the ship in dry dock and replace the propeller because it had bent the propeller, one of the propellers. Also, I was out on one of the trial trips on the Kitty Hawk. We had a hurricane, and I thought we were on a submarine at that time because the flight deck from the waterline was 63 feet. And the water was coming over the flight deck so that you couldn't even see the flight deck. It was covered with water. So that was exciting trip there.
Get seasick?
No, there were 3,000 personnel on the ship. 2,000 of them were sick, and 1,000 of us ran the ship for everybody because they weren't able to get out of the bunk.
What were you doing during the storm? How were you helping run the ship?
In the engine room, checking on all the readings and documenting all the readings of the equipment to make sure it was operating correctly.
So this was a shakedown cruise for the Kitty Hawk then?
Yes.
And it functioned well in a heavy storm, it sounds like.
Yes, and I was very glad to see that.
What happened to the whale, by the way, that was hit?
It was in the morning, very early morning, and we saw a lot of red blood in the water, so I think the whale died. We were watching a school of whales, and apparently this one whale had gotten lost, and we didn't pick it up in time, and we hit it.
When you're at it on a Navy ship at sea, how did the military people deal with you, not deal with you well? Because they're working hard to get their ship moving and operating, and you're drawing. Did they understand what you're doing? Did they cooperate with you very well?
Yeah, at that time we didn't draw. When we went on these trial trips, we were there to do maintenance work or to do observation and make sure the equipment was operating properly. The drawing was done back in the drafting room. They worked very well with us. There were always Navy personnel on board who were checking to make sure everything was going right. They would ask questions about the equipment and so forth, and we got along very well. One thing I forgot, there was an old aircraft carrier, the Shangri-La, on duty in the Mediterranean, and 20 of us from New York ship boarded a plane and flew and got on the Shangri-La for 20 days because it was coming back to Philadelphia Navy Yard for an overhaul. And we had to record all the equipment that had to be replaced and reordered. So we spent 20 days aboard the ship doing that. And of course, the Navy was in charge totally of the ship at that time. One time we had a general quarters, of which I wasn't familiar with at that time. And I was told go all the way down to the 04 level at the bottom of the ship. And I asked the question, well, suppose this ship gets hit and starts to flood. How do we get out of here? He said, you don't. What do you mean you don't? Nobody opens that hatch until we're given the word that we can open it because we could flood. I said, well, who's going to stop us? He said, I am. And he pulled out his .45, and I understood the problem at that time.
Learned a little bit about military life at that point.
Yes.
Did you enjoy this aspect of your job, where you work ashore most of the time but go aboard ship on occasion and travel for weeks at a time?
Yes, I enjoyed that very much.
How'd your wife like it?
She got used to the idea, and she understood that that was part of my making a living. And even after I stopped working at New York Ship and went elsewhere, I still had trips that I had to make, and she understood that.
Good. Let's look at the actual working conditions at New York Ship. How would you describe the conditions there in the shipyard from the time you were in the yard from 53 to 60?
58 to 60, 65.
65, 58 to 65. What were the working conditions like? Were they good in the beginning, not so good at the end? Were they good throughout? Did they change in any way?
The working conditions were good at all times. The only problem was apparently the management of the shipyard decided that they were going to sell a lot of the heavy cranes and a lot of the equipment that the shipyard had. And because of that, toward the end, we couldn't finish some of the ships that we had under construction. They were finished at the Philadelphia Navy Yard.
And you say the management, who's the owner of the shipyard at this point?
Mr. Wolfson.
And what did he do? Let me ask you this, was the shipyard in good condition when he bought it? Did it go downhill as a result of his management, do you think?
Yes, it did. We had a lot of heavy equipment, could build aircraft carriers in any size ship when I first went there. It became a problem toward the middle of 1965, and we made like 24 consecutive bids on new ship work, and we were the highest bidder of all of them, which is impossible to do unless you make it a point. So it became obvious that they weren't going to continue building ships.
So do you believe then that the management under this Mr. Wolfson was high bidding just so that the shipyard would go out of business?
That's what I think, yes.
Why would they want it to go out of business?
I have no idea why he would do that. He was taking all of the heavy equipment and making the money on selling that, and apparently didn't want to stay in the shipbuilding industry. So I can't answer that.
Once the shipyard starts losing contracts and there's fewer ships to be built, I guess people are laid off. When did the layoffs start about? What year roughly?
It had to be, well, my brother was also a rigger at New York Shipbuilding Corporation about the same time I was there. He was laid off at the end of his apprenticeship after a year because they didn't have a lot of ships to build.
That was what year about?
64, around that time.
So about 63, 64 is when things started getting going downhill, so to speak.
Yes, and I had read what was going on in my mind, so I had decided to leave.
I guess other workers had a sense of what was happening, and what was their reaction to it?
They were disheartened by it. They had a sense of things were coming to an end.
Do you think the shipyard closed down partly because it was in a high wage area versus a shipyard in Louisiana or up in Maine? Cost of labor would be cheaper. Do you think that had an impact?
I don't know what the competition for bidding on ships was as far as the cost and what the Navy would permit, but I don't know that that was necessarily true. You still had to get trained people, and these trained people were not going to make minimum wages. They were going to make good wages if they were good workers.
As a shipyard starts slowing down, where do the people who are laid off, where do they go?
They go out to different industries. Some of them went to other shipyards, stayed in the shipyard industry, but many others, like my brother, went into insurance sales and did very well. But that kind of thing happened.
And what starts happening to the community of Camden, where many of these shipyard workers lived?
Well, of course, all the restaurants and all the shops that were serving the workers there would be losing money and clientele. I think Camden was struck hard by this because they sent a lot of steel and all kinds of equipment, pipe and all of that was sold to the shipyard. Were no longer being sold.
Were you a native of Camden or no?
I was Philadelphia.
Philadelphia.
I lived in Philadelphia.
Did any of the people go over to the Philadelphia Navy Yard, which was still
Yes.
open at the time?
Yes, they did.
So the city starts changing. Uh, you notice some of the changes. The workers' morale, was it high, lower?
It was lower when I left, yes, than it was when I first went there.
And you were in the area when the shipyard finally closed. What was your reaction to it when the final word came out, that's it, we're closing down?
Okay, I had left about a year or two before that happened, so I wasn't at the shipyard at the time that happened, and my brother wasn't either. So, but I know from just reading the newspapers and so forth that things were disappointing to the people of Camden and the neighbors I mean, we had people all over New Jersey who worked, and Pennsylvania, who worked at the shipyard, and they no longer had jobs.
What happens then after you leave the shipyard? What happens to you? What do you do next?
Well, after I left the shipyard, I went to United Engineers in Philadelphia, and I was there for 23 years. So I didn't have a problem because I had this mechanical talent that they wanted in heavy industry. So I could convert from shipbuilding to power plant design, that kind of thing.
Is that, and did you get an engineering degree ultimately, or?
No, I have a degree as an architect. Later, ultimately, I went to Drexel University, became an architect, and registered in 6 states. New York was one of them, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, South Carolina, quite a few states. But now I'm retired and I'm only registered in Pennsylvania and only do part-time work.
So you use your architectural skills throughout your career then?
That's right.
How'd you pick up those skills? You said you started to become an art teacher. When did you notice you first had these skills of an artist? People like myself, I'm a failure at it, but people like yourself just have that knack.
In high school, I also had a vocational arts course, but at the same time, I took enough credits to be eligible to enter college. So that's when I started knowing that I had some ability to draw and paint and art.
Looking back now on your experiences at New York Shipyard, impact on your life, changes, whatever, that you think are important to talk about?
I was very happy at New York Ship. It was a very challenging field to work in. My brother and I, he was a rigger and I was working in the drawing room, we would often get together and talk a lot, and we both felt very happy about what we were doing. And it was disappointing that it had to terminate the way it did.
Do you feel any anger towards Wolfson and the management for what they did? And basically, it sounds like they just basically sold off the yard. One person told me they actually made more money selling the equipment than they did in operating the yard.
That's probably true, because otherwise he would not do it. He wouldn't have done that. He would have kept it as a whole and sold it as a shipyard. That may have been true. I don't know that that's the way it is, but that may have been very true.
Now, at this point, as we're looking back, is there anything I didn't ask that you think is important to talk about? Anything about your job, experiences, whatever it might be?
No, I think pretty much discussed everything that you would want to hear and be interested in. As I say, it was a good experience, and it helped me in my future life to begin to understand why you need these composite drawings. And I could see that they became, as CAD developed, and they started making this kind of drawing, not only an exterior design, but a three-dimensional design of all the systems in a building. That way they could verify before it's constructed that they had the clearances they needed, and it worked.
How about, one thing I didn't ask about, did many women do this job, or was it a man's profession at the time?
There were not many women in the drawing room that I recall. There were some. Most of the 600 people in that room were men.
Many minorities at work in a drawing room? Did they work out building a ship? Were there not many minorities working at the shipyard?
No, we had minorities both in the shipyard and in the drawing room, based on their ability and experience. That that wasn't a consideration that I'm aware of.
You've seen the display downstairs, down below, next deck down below, sorry, I'm talking as a Marine. On the next deck down below, about New York Shipyard that was recently opened this year in 2006. Any reactions to that display? Is it accurate? Does it help tell the story of New York Ship?
Yes, I believe it does. There's a lot of good information there, and it shows the people that worked there. It shows the ships that they constructed, and I thought it was very good.
Is there anything that people should remember about New York Shipyard 100 years from now, after you and I are both gone?
That it had a lot to do with defending the country, with providing excellent ships for the Navy, and I think that's pretty important, the defense of the country, because of the shipyard.
There's that sense of you're helping a country while you're working at the shipyard. Did
Yes.
that permeate the working staff?
Yes, it did.
Was there much pride in your work at the shipyard, do you think?
There's no doubt about that. Yes, there was. You not only did it because you liked it, you did it because there was a definite need for it, that it was important.
Did we, in your opinion, build high-quality ships, higher quality ships than other countries?
I don't think there's any doubt about that. Yes, we did. The ships that were built were in service for many years that I'm aware of. And I don't know of any of the ships that had problems being in service.
Just a point of interest, did you ever do any contract work on any foreign ships that might have been brought into the shipyard for repair or updating?
No,
nothing like that?
I did not.
It was just
only Navy ships.
Just construction Navy ships and so on. You weren't involved then in working in any container ships or cargo ships of any type?
No.
Okay, good.
No, it was not.
Okay. All right, anything else at this point?
I think we've covered everything.
Well, thank you so much.
You're
Today
welcome.
I've been speaking with Mr. David Cross, who worked at New York Ship from 1958 to 1965. Today is February 6th, and we're aboard the battleship New Jersey. Camden, New Jersey. My name is Dr. Tom Bannett with Camden University and the Battleship New Jersey Oral History Project. Thank you very much, Mr. Cross.
Okay,
Thank you so much.
February the 3rd, 06.
Pardon me?
You said it was February the 6th. Today's
February
February the 3rd,
3rd.
2006.
2006. Thank you very much. As a historian, we have to get that correct. What I did is I put my pad over there, and I didn't want to bring it back for fear of banging into something.
No problem.
Thank you so much. All right.
You're welcome.
Thank you.